It's Arya, Roohi, and Robert Graves. Still calling Arya's deck Black-Green Delirium, though I do want to mention this is the aggressive version of the deck. And really, I think it's enough different. You know, we're not going to see anything like grapples.
Yeah, it's all just about beatdowns. You know, we still have the Traverse the Elven Wall. It's one copy of Liliana, the Last Hope. Though for the most part, this is just creatures that are going to be attacking.
All right, so for Robert Graves, winning the die roll, he will start on Toolcraft Exemplar. We go to Arya Roohi, and his turn one play just to Traverse the Elven Vault. Now, there are some 1-drops in the Black-Green Delirium deck. 2 copies of Gnarlwood Dryad are available.
Though the deck is mostly trying to get up to 5, 4 copies of Verdurous Gearhulk. There's also a couple copies of Kalitas Trader Get on 4. The deck plays 23 lands, so leveraging Traverse just to find a basic on turn 1 is likely to be a common play for this deck.
Big aggressive start for Graves. Played Thraben Inspector on turn 2. That clue, because it's an artifact, turned Toolcraft Exemplar into a 3/2. He attacked for 3 and then played a second Toolcraft Exemplar. So he's starting to swing of 7 points here on turn 3.
Yeah, this is a very fast start for Graves, and Arya doesn't have access to anything like a Flaying Tendrils. There's no way to really catch up very quickly. He kind of wants to curve Grimflayer or Grasp of Darkness into Catacomb Sifter here. It's kind of the best options that he has.
Well, Grimflayer will be the play. We'll see how Robert can respond, and it is with the removal spell. Harnessed Lightning makes 3 energy. 2 of it is spent to kill Grimflayer, and here's an attack for 7 from Robert Graves.
Arya already falling down to 10. If there's no Catacomb Sifter here, it's going to be very difficult for Arya to win. Liliana, the Last Hope, would be fine. It could kill an Exemplar, but then the Crackback would kill the Liliana.
Yeah, so the point to remember is that those Exemplars are only 3/2 on Robert's turn during the attack.
Right. They are quite fragile on your opponent's turn as they revert to 1/1s.
Oh, so can Arya hit something like Liliana? Now, that's one of the things of this aggro Delirium deck. Arya only has 1 copy of Liliana in the main, as opposed to the 4 or 3 you'd expect to see out of the more mid-range version.
And when you look at sideboard options, when we move closer to that, sometimes the controlling versions will have Flaying Tendrils. Arya won't have access to that in this matchup.
Yeah, and this play isn't going to help Arya any. His turn 3 play, a copy of Smuggler's Copter, but nothing to crew it, means that he's taking another 7. That's going to drop him down to 3 on the next attack. 1 more card. Does it do anything for Arya? Maybe something like Kalitas, but that will be game number 1 to Mardu Vehicles. Robert Graves with the fast start. Arya not having the answer.
Kalitas would have been really the best case scenario for Arya, and Robert Graves would have had it covered with an Unlicensed Disintegration or his leftover energy plus another Harnessed Lightning. So it was a really good draw there for Robert. Not a lot that Arya could have even done.
All right, yeah. We'll go to Arya's sideboard then, and if that match is any indication, he's going to need some faster interaction than that.
Definitely.
So we have 4 copies of Tireless Tracker, 2 copies of Ishkana Graph Widow, 2 Deadweights. Those seem like a pretty big winner here. 2 Natural State, 2 Noose Constrictor, a Demon of Dark Schemes, an Emrakul, the Promised End, and a Kalitas Trader of Get. Now, you were talking yesterday about how, you know, you wish one of these decks could play a Massacre Worm. All right, Arya's got one of them, but I don't know if a 6-mana spell would have helped him any there.
No, it would have been much too slow. The fortunate thing here is he has a lot of stuff to slow the game down. The 2 Deadweights, the Natural States are pretty good against a deck like Mardu Vehicles. You could kill a Smuggler's Copter. You could kill maybe their lone artifact to make the Toolcraft Exemplars just be 1/1s. Noose Constrictor is another good blocker. That potentially could have survived a Harnessed Lightning, but at a very steep cost, of course. The extra Kalitas is very good. Something to keep in mind, though, is that you don't want to expose yourself too much to Unlicensed Disintegration, so I wouldn't go too heavy on Kalitas, but Ishkana is going to be excellent.
So it's in a lot of ways, we're kind of saying Arya needs to turn into the more traditional black-green deck after sideboarding.
Yeah, wants to find a way to just slow Robert down and do a lot of blocking. You know, his deck is really geared towards attacking, and post-sideboard, you know, those Blossoming Defense seem important if he wants to beat down, but I don't really know that he really even wants Blossoming in his Defense in his deck post-sideboard. He should at least trim on that.
Well, for those of you joining us today, thank you for joining, whether you're on StarCgames.com or Twitch.tv. Join the feature match area with us. We broadcast all weekend And with our Twitch subscription program, you can sign up for only $4.99 a month. You get custom emoticons, you get a badge, and you get to decide the quarterfinals today. So that means after the conclusion of round 15, we vote on which players and which decks you want to see as we do our coverage in the single elimination rounds. Head on over to twitch.tv/SCG Live. Now on Robert Graves' side, with these aggressive decks, they frequently know that their opponents, especially their black decks, are going to try to board in deadweights, board in lots of little cards. So what they do is they become mid-range. They start getting heavier, harder hitting threats. I'm looking at Gideon's, I'm looking at Sky Sovereign, maybe more Unlicensed Disintegration. Do you like any of those from Robert Graves in this match?
I like Gideon a whole lot. That's really the best card that white decks have against these green-black decks. In particular, Arya's build is unlikely to have something like a Ruinous Path, so the Gideon will probably be very effective.
Now keep in mind, these are copies number 3 and 4. Actually, Robert has 2 already in the main.
I would go up to 4 every time. Gideon seems great, and probably bring in Needle Spires as you want to slow yourself down, and the creature land will be relevant as well. Unlicensed Disintegration is pretty solid. The fact that it is a form of reach is going to be really good when you expect your opponent to be casting a lot of removal spells. And Declaration in Stone likely comes in against anybody you expect an Ishkana out of.
Oh, that's going to be Arya.
Yeah, and also this more aggressive build, Verdurous Gearhulk is a really big monster. So having extra clean answers to that is significant.
Yeah, I suppose killing it with Harnessed Lightning is...
It's a tall order.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean...
if there's other creatures on the battlefield as well, you can deal with one of them, but Arya can just kind of distribute the counters, and it doesn't really matter.
So Arya will be on the play here, game number 2. It's our first look at the black-green aggressive deck, the aggressive take on Delirium. It really has looked this weekend that black-green strategies have been dominant at the top of the standings.
The aggressive black-green deck has been performing a bit worse. Certainly in the heads-up game, you'd rather be on the controlling version.
You know, and that's might be one of the reasons we aren't seeing too much of it. Going back to, you know, those Obzon decks, Obzon aggro versus Obzon midrange. Yeah, midrange usually does pretty well there.
Yeah.
So once again, Graves, even on the draw, hits the board first. It's going to be a copy of Inventor's Apprentice, but now you see Arya playing out of the sideboard. He dead weights it and makes a Gnarlwood Dryad.
And dead weight would not always kill the Apprentice, so that being the one drop, that was really beneficial for Arya.
Graves replaces the lost creature with Smuggler's Copter as we go back to Arya's turn 3. Gnarlwood Dryad, the 1/1 Death Touch from Eldritch Moon. With Delirium, it turns into a 3/3. Now this card has been we saw some of it last season in Standard. As far as rates go, this thing is even modern playable. You're talking about the possibility to get a 3/3 Death Touch for 1.
It has showed up in some builds of Death Shadow. It's excellent on blocks, and it can be quite good on offense as well.
Right now, it swings just for 1. And Catacomb Sifter from Arya. I wasn't sure if we'd see much Catacomb Sifter after Rally the Ancestors rotated out. Well, really happy to see the card again.
Catacomb Sifter is actually an excellent card on rate. Historically,
3/4 for 3?
Yeah, the more degenerate a format gets, the worse this kind of card looks. But a 3/4 for 3 mana, that's super powerful. It has upside too. This scrying bonus, the mana acceleration. Sometimes Arya's deck will want to use that to curve 3 into Verdurous Gearhulk.
So no play on 3 mana for Robert. He just passes. And we go back to Arya, so he'll take the damage. He'll swing in for 4. And he's plays a 4th line. He's pulling ahead right now. Kind of expect something like an Unlicensed Disintegration, some sort of removal out of Robert, but it hasn't produced yet.
There's really nothing that he needs to kill too proactively here, though I imagine the hand is something like Unlicensed Disintegration into Gideon with this low of a start.
Grim Flare from Arya. There is an Unlicensed Disintegration, and as you mentioned, the Gideon in Graves' hand, so we'll see how he plays.
Though as Arya commits more to the board, that Gideon is looking pretty sorry.
Well, Robert's going to disintegrate something. We'll see what, though. And one thing I was wondering here, you've seen Arya really lower his curve post-sideboard, and Robert has upped his curve. Has a role switch happened here where suddenly Arya's the aggro and Robert's the control deck, or are we still the other way?
So Arya is still trying to play the control. Catacomb Sifter, Gnarlwood Dryad, these are great creatures to block with. The way that things have shaped up, though, he just gets to attack because Robert's not doing very much. Though as we see Robert commit this Gideon, he wants to use this to try to stem the bleeding because Arya has assumed the beatdown the way that things have played out.
So Graves is at 15. He unlicensed Disintegration to away the Catacomb Sifter last turn. That still left Arya with 4 creatures. Gideon making an ally and that Smuggler's Copter are going to hope to hold off the attack. There's only 2 cards in Arya's hand, and Robert looks to have, I think, 4. So if Robert can stabilize here, there's a good chance that he can pull ahead just naturally.
Arya really wants to find a way to break through this Gideon this turn. The value that card generates just snowballs out of control very quickly. Every turn you let your opponent have Gideon, things get worse.
Well, I guess then if Arya wants to get the Gideon, he's going to have to turn these Gnarlwood Dryads into 3/3s.
Right now, just 2 card types in the graveyard. It's kind of a tall order. Something like Evolving Wilds plus Grasp of Darkness would be like the perfect 2-card hand for him here.
Yeah. There's an Ishkana as one of Arya's 2 remaining cards. Don't believe he has land number 5 either.
He does have the Scion, but he doesn't have Delirium, so the Spider is not very effective from here.
That's unexciting. You know, and that is something with this aggressive version. If you're not playing cards like Vessel of Nascency and Grapple with the Past, it's not guaranteed that your Ishkana will always bring Spiderlings.
Yeah, there's a reasonable mix of different card types in Arya's deck, though he's so heavy on creatures that does make achieving Delirium difficult.
Looking like maybe the Scion will make mana for Roohi. All right, Scion, Ishkana, no Spiderlings, and just a pass. A big win for Robert Graves. Over on the back table, you see there Brad Carpenter, Season 3 leader right now, picking up another win. That improves him to 8-2 with a green-black Aetherworks Marvel deck.
Impressive stuff, yeah. Inching ever closer to that top 8. Graves just picked up another Gideon. Depending on how the mana is shaping up here, there's a reasonable argument for getting an emblem here and then making another token with the other Gideon, depending if he can 2-spell otherwise. Of course, right now, as things stand, Arya would have to commit a lot of resources to try to attack the first Gideon, which makes just utilizing one for an emblem pretty aggressive use of them. And it does look like Robert had 2 lands in his hand. He played 1 there, so
sure.
He kind of has to hold on to these resources kind of tightly.
So the play from Robert, he Declaration and stones away the Ishkana. Arya gets a clue. Robert plays a tap land and just makes another Knight ally. As far as powerful follow-ups, that's one that Arya could possibly beat.
Yep. He does need to find a way to break through these allies. That Smuggler's Copter, it will be a 3/3 blocker. Robert would just crew that as a blocker. So he does have a lot he has to get through this first Gideon, and then Robert has backup Gideon. Arya really has to get more going than he has right now.
Arya cracks the clue, and a shake of the head there. He still is not finding a way through, and now the Gnarlwood Dryads may just have to attack on in. This ally army is forming.
Verdurous Gearhulk would have been a lot better for Arya than that Ishkana was, but
yeah,
that's just wishful thinking.
Arya's going to traverse for a land. With Sorcery, that is his 3rd card type in the graveyard. Except for if he could get to 4, land Grasp of Darkness, it still would likely be good enough here. But the time's running out on him hitting Delirium.
It looks like he does have Grasp of Darkness. The unfortunate thing about this play is that he has another land in play, and he just had to traverse for a land, or in his hand rather, and he just had to traverse for a land.
Yeah, to set up the Delirium. So here's a swing with the team. It's a pair of 1/1s and a 2/2 on the surface. Robert's got to know if that card is Grasp. They're actually both, it's 3/2, 3/3s into 4/4 trample.
This is an interesting situation for Robert because Arya probably has to make this bluff if he doesn't have it, but he does have it. So you can choose to play as if he has it or not. Robert's hand, he just has a land plus a backup Gideon. You want to play as if he has it as much as possible.
Yeah, his hand is somewhat fragile here.
Though if you decide that you could only win if he doesn't have it, then you might try to leverage that way.
So Arya had sent all the creatures at Robert. So Robert went to crew Smuggler's Copter, and now Arya uses the grasp before blocks on the artifact. So no blocks from Robert. He's taking 10, drops
And
to 5, and here comes the trigger on Flare.
Robert really wanted to be able to loot with the copter, so he took that line to crew, which is sort of playing as if Arya doesn't have it. Just throwing the Knight allies in front of the Gnarlwood Dryads is maybe what you would have done if you tried to play as if this was some kind of bluff.
Yeah, I mean, if he has grasp, there's no good block. There's no way that he gets much out of it.
So he tried to make the play that was the highest percentage possible. Arya had the grasp, and now Robert's kind of in trouble.
Yeah, Grim Flare sets up Arya's draw next turn to go back to Robert Graves. Draws a copy of Scrap Heap Scrounger. Well, if he needs to block, that's not going to help any.
And Arya still at 17. He would much rather have anything that actually could block.
Gideon will make an emblem. Robert's creatures now have +1/+1 for the rest of the game. Here's another Gideon. That one will make a Knight ally. So now a trio of 3/3s. Robert's going to play out the rest of his hand, which is that last 6th land and a copy of Scrap Heap Scrounger. He'll pass the turn.
If Arya could pick up a Verdurous Gearhulk here, that would really break this board wide open.
Yeah, well, he did set up his draw, so you have to think it's something good.
Yeah, currently, the Dryads just trade outright with those allies because of the Gideon emblem.
Yeah, can Arya get through for the last damage? He had set up this card, but he doesn't seem to be particularly happy with it. He actually set up the top 2 cards of his deck, so he doesn't, you know, he knows his next draw as well. Yeah, and here's the Verdurous Gearhulk.
So it was a great draw step, but there's a lot of complicated math happening in the combat here. You have to think about, how do you think that Robert's going to block these creatures when they come in for the combat? How can I leverage this best possible?
And I like this. He's going to make both the Gnarlwood Dryads into 4/4s. And what he's doing here is forcing a double block to kill any of his attackers, because Robert can only make 1 double block here.
Yep. With the Dryads as 4/4s, it takes 2 allies. Death Touch allows him to clean up both, and the Grim Player is just a 6/6.
So a swing here of the team. So Robert's going to double block the 6/6, put 1 in front of the Gnarlwood Dryad. He'll go to 1, trade with the Grim Flare, lose the rest of his creatures. And we look like we're going to head for a 3rd game. Verdurous Gearhulk, the card that Arya wanted.
Yeah, a Declaration of Stone could deal with both Dryads, but then there's just a 4/4 trample left behind that would just kill Robert, and he's at 1.
Yeah. So game 2 to Arya Roohi, and he evens things up at 1 game apiece. Each game right now seems to be the player that can grab the aggro role has taken the game.
Yeah, and Robert's deck is one-dimensional. It's going to try to be as aggressive as possible. Gideon allows him to do some blocking, play the control that way. He does have removal spells, but even his removal spells, like Unlicensed Disintegration, they're trying to punch through. You know, Inventor's Apprentice, Toolcraft Exemplar specifically, these aren't going to be great if he has to block. Whereas Arya's deck, Gnarlwood Dryad, is great on attacks and defense. So Arya is going to try to kill stuff earlier, try to turn the corner as fast as possible.
All right, players are going to get ready for Game 3. We're going to join them there in just a second. But first, we're going to tell you about our next upcoming GP, the first Starseed Grand Prix in 2017. It's Legacy, and it's Grand Prix Louisville.
On January 6th through the 8th, make plans to be part of Magic the Gathering history when StarCityGames.com proudly presents Grand Prix Louisville. Register by December 9th for the Legacy format main event to compete for thousands of dollars in prizes and receive an exclusive playmat featuring Legacy staple and Kaladesh invention, Lotus Petal. Select the 3-day Infinite Challenge package to compete in all challenge events for one low price, while also walking away with the exclusive Lotus Petal playmat. All Friday challenges are also Grand Prix trials. Come out early and compete for buys in the main event and more chances to claim a Lotus Petal playmat. Prefer 100-card formats? Register for the Ultimate Commander package to play in 4 Commander on-demand events and take home a Commander vs. playmat and Ultimate Guard Flip and Tray deck case. And don't forget to come say hello to Grand Prix Louisville's many special guests, including cosplayer Christine Sprinkle and an artist alley full of fan favorites headlined by guest of honor Rob Alexander. Be part of Magic the Gathering history. Register for Grand Prix Louisville today.
So come join us. That's in just 2 months. It's our Legacy Grand Prix in Louisville.
There's some pretty good Delver decks in Legacy. Maybe check them out.
Have you switched over to Grixis? Or are you still Team or Delver?
I think I'm supposed to play Grixis.
I know it's a hard sell to get you to play Grixis cards, but I just thought I would ask.
It's more. I just don't like Deathrite Shaman. I don't know. Something about it just bugs me, and I can't put my finger on it. I don't have an eloquent reason for why I avoid it. I did play it in Modern. When Grixis Delver was the Modern deck, when Deathrite Shaman was legal, I alternated between playing Deathrite Shaman and Tarmogoyf, and every tournament I played, I was playing the wrong card.
You should have been playing Jund when Deathrite Shaman was legal.
No.
It was really good. Turn 2 Liliana was really good.
Go review some articles from Modern in that era. Deathrite Shaman plus Delver was a very good deck. But anyway, when I registered Tarmogoyf, I ran into Tron, and it was miserable.
Right.
And when
that's never been a good match.
When I registered Deathrite Shaman, I ran into Lingering Souls, and it was miserable.
No, you get rid of their Lingering Souls.
You
before
sure
they flash
do.
it back.
You sure do. Or maybe they just hit 5 land drops.
All right, both players have kept on their 7s for game number 3. Robert Graves starts off on Thraben Inspector. As mentioned before, in the last 2 games, the player who can take the aggro has been the winner. And both players are going to contest it this time. Gnarlwood Dryad's the play for Arya. Robert will offer the trade. I don't think that will be taken.
Yep.
And his follow-up is Scrap Heap Scrounger for 3-2. Not really the card that Arya wants to spend this Grasp of Darkness on.
No, not the card that he wants to block with his Gnarlwood Dryad either.
Yeah, even if he hits Delirium, it's still a trade.
The 2 threats that Robert has dispatched so far, 2 things that pretty good against removal. The Thraben Inspector just replaces itself with the Clue token, and the Scrap Heap Scrounger as a way of coming back. For Arya, against Scrap Heap Scrounger, his line is really to try to get up to Kalitas and then kill it and exile it that way.
Well, if that's his line, this next play is going to help him a ton to do that. Servant of the Conduit's the turn 2 play. The mana accelerant from Arya Roohi could get him up to Kalitas as early as next turn.
And then the test is whether Robert has an unlicensed disintegration. Aether Hub plus Harness Lightning would also be something that Robert would be looking for.
3rd land is the draw from Robert Graves. He will Harness Lightning away the Servant. Keeps Kalitas at bay for at least 1 turn. Swings on in. No great blocks yet for Arya. He will trade the Gnarlwood Dryad with Scrap Heap Scrounger. Just takes 1. Goes to 18.
And if Arya is able to just stem the bleeding for the first few turns, start getting Kalitas, maybe have Delirium cast an Ishkana, that starts to invalidate the Scrap Heap Scrounger. So while it's not the most exciting block, he just needs to not take too much damage in the early turns.
And this is Arya is going to deadweight the Thraben Inspector and play Grim Flare. I wasn't certain he'd make the play because of the Scrap Heap Scrounger in Robert's yard. But it looks like he does.
And Robert's running pretty low on cards here.
Yeah, he Harness Lightnings away the Grim Flare. Robert has 2 cards left. He has a Declaration in Stone and a Gideon. And he also has that Scrounger in the graveyard and the Clue. So there's some play, but you're right.
Yeah, Robert really wants to find the land to cast that Gideon.
Yeah.
Well, actually, he had a tap land. He just couldn't
yeah.
cast it that turn, rather.
Catacomb Sifter into play for Arya. Robert will play Gideon. He'll make a Knight ally past the turn. 2-2 not great at blocking just yet, so some damage will go across onto the Gideon. But Robert has a second one. He picked up it at that turn.
Yep, these Gideons are very effective. Now the pressure's on Arya to start hitting his 5-drop creatures, either a Verdurous Gearhulk or an Ishkana. He doesn't quite have Delirium just yet, so the Gearhulk would be better at this phase of the game.
Yeah, just 2 card types in the yard for Arya. This black-green aggressive Delirium deck has to do a lot more work to hit their card types.
Makes you wonder how effective the sideboard Ishkanas really are. This matchup, certainly they're less good than against Blue-White Flash. They probably play a better role there.
For 3 mana, it's another Catacomb Sifter for Roohi and another Scion. Roohi's last 2 cards look to be a Servant to the Conduit and a Grasp of Darkness.
Little shortcut there for Roohi. He intends to use the fresh Scion for mana immediately. Get a couple scries with both Catacomb Sifters, so no reason to put it on the battlefield.
So the first scry will go to the bottom. He gets another scry of 1. And that one looks like it's traversed the Ulfin Vault. He does not have Delirium yet. So that's to debate whether he wants to keep it. I'm not sure that he does. I suppose Hissing Quagmire could be a card type for him. if it starts attacking. He could make that trade when he wants to.
It would take him a few turns to make that happen, and his traverse would be less effective. It would be difficult for him to cast what he found in the same turn. So I do like that he bottomed there.
Plays the Servant of the Conduit, and now looks like Catacomb Sifter will attack. And yeah, that just went at Robert. He's ignoring the Gideon right now.
2 damage on the Gideon, not super effective.
Go back to Robert Graves. He drew a 3rd copy of Harnessed Lightning. And now Gideon will just continue bringing along his allies.
Considering that the attack just put Robert down to 18, though.
Right,
I would like getting the Gideon down to 2. That way Robert doesn't have the option to emblem 2nd Gideon.
And I like the amount of 2-mana plays Robert has here. And I think he's going to go for some combination. He's got Declaration in Stone and Harnessed Lightning in hand. He's got that Clue, and he has a Scrap Heap Scrounger in his graveyard. He's going to start by Declaration away the Sifters. Interested by this one. I'm not sure that Arya is disappointed.
No, I think that Arya is probably pretty happy with that. This play suggests that Robert would want to try to turn the corner here, though he's still kind of in ally mode in the Gideon. But on the following turn, you can convert this into getting aggressive with this Gideon. So this is kind of banking on Arya's top of his deck not being good. And Robert did see Arya just scryed 2 cards to the bottom. He was using his Scion to cast a 2/2.
So Robert attacked with 1 Knight, passed. He's left up mana for either that Clue token or the Scrap Heap Scrounger. I mean, are we thinking we might see something like end of turn Scrounger, untap, Emblem, play Gideon, another Emblem, swing for 13?
The plan might even just be to plus Gideon, just attack with this one, and if Arya cracks back, he's removed all of his blockers because they had to attack, and then he just has backup Gideon.
I could get behind that one too.
Yeah, as it stands right now, the best Arya can do is trade Servant of the Conduit for 2/2 token.
Now, you'd been talking yesterday about how Gideon was pound for pound the best card in Standard, and I'm starting to see why with this game.
Yeah,
he has so many options.
Gideon is uncontested in the top 5 Planeswalkers of all time. Likely in the top 3, actually. This card is very powerful.
That's some high praise. It's up there with like the Elspeth Knight Errants of the world.
Gideon might actually just be a better card than Elspeth. As you look at Modern and Legacy decks, they are playing Gideon over Elspeth currently.
Sure.
It's better at actually winning games on its own.
So we had from Arya a Grasp of Darkness on the untapped blocker, and then an attack. And the attack once again goes at Robert. He's just ignoring the Gideon.
I'm not convinced of what Arya's strategy is here.
So, I mean, Robert, he'll be fine with that. He brings back the Scrounger on end step, untaps, pluses Gideon, attacks for 10. Yeah, if this is a race, which I think Arya is playing toward, I don't understand it. Now, and it may have turned out right. Had Arya killed the Gideon, I mean, Robert's been playing this whole game with a second one in his hand, so punishment pretty low.
Yeah. I would have at least, liked to have seen putting the Gideon out of emblem range, though of course this game is all about attacking for 5 with Gideon. And realistically, I'm not seeing a way that Arya could be winning this game.
Arya's hand has a Birder Skeerhulk and a Kalitas in his hand. He's going to go for the Kalitas. Now, I believe Robert has another Harness Lightning and just a stack of energy here. And you see, this is going to be Kalitas for Arya. He casts it off of a Scion as opposed to using that Hissing Quagmire.
He's leaving up Quagmire's Servant, representing Grasp of Darkness or some such.
Sure, so you can grasp the Scrounger, exile it, get a zombie. I could get behind that. End step, Robert's going to crack a Clue to draw a card. See, there is a Harness Lighting there, 3 energy, so he is going to be able to shoot down that Kalitas. And that might just be lethal here.
Right, the Arya down to 6.
And there's the play, Harness Lightning on Kalitas. Does Roohi respond? I think he has to.
Using the Grasp to exile the Scrap Heap Scrounger, that kind of matters, but now with Arya down to 6, he has to tap his 2/2 just to get a different 2/2. Just has 1 blocker.
He lost his blocker to get another one. So Kalitas is down. There's just a 2/2 as we go back to Robert's turn. And I believe Roohi to just be dead on board to activating Needle Spires. That's what Robert says. Activate Needle Spire swing. You have 1 blocker. I have a 4 damage, 2 and 5, and that's the extension of the hand. Robert Graves with Mardu Vehicles. He's your winner in 3, advancing to 8 and 2.